Thank you so much for watching this episode, which is going to be all about the Graflex Speed Graphic large format camera. A lot of people have asked why I use this camera and how it works, so I'm going to run through that today in detail. I'm going to be talking about the benefits over some of the other large format cameras, and I'll show some of the things that it can do. For instance, I can shoot with the Aero Ektar lens, 19th century Petval lens, and simple projector lenses. This particular camera with the Aero Ektar took this shot here, which is down the lane. That's my dear friend Katerina. I think that was shot on portrait. And this particular shot here, this was also done, this was for an exhibition recently. That again was shot with the Aero Ektar. So I'm going to run through a couple of images here. Then I'm going to do come in close and show you some details of the functions of this camera, how it works, what to do with it, what not to do with it. So this particular one here, this was shot inside a Gothic house. That was with the abandoned house with the fallen angels. That's shot with the Aero Ektar. And then we move on to some interesting ones. So this is Bob the Goth. I mentioned that in my introductory video. That was shot using the Ektar projector lens. Moving on to, which one's this? This was, you can see the tiny depth of field because that's f2.8, I think. Again, that one's shot with the Ektar lens with the Speed Graphic. And the last one, which was the wonderful circus actress, again, this was shot with the Ektar lens in the Speed Graphic. So it's an amazingly flexible camera. I love shooting with it. I really love shooting with it. Like I say, I'll run into some details here. The other thing it can do is it can shoot Instax. Here's a couple of Instax wides that I've done with it recently. They were done 3 weeks ago with this combination. I think they were with the standard lens inside the Speed Graphic. So I'm going to now come in close, show you some details. Oh, by the way, obviously, you can, if you want to be really flash, put that thing on it. But they're stupidly expensive because, as you probably know, this is the foundation of the lightsaber for Star Wars. So you tend not to find them very often. Or if you do, they're very expensive. So I'm going to cut now. I'm going to come in close and I will show you the functions and the details and how this camera works. So here we have our Speed Graphic. I think this is a 1948 model. The first thing to work out on a Speed Graphic is how to open it. And there's usually a little dimple or a button. In this instance, it's just there. So if I push that little button in, the front will drop down and reveal the front standard. And there's a little lever there. If I just pull that across to the center, that will allow me to now pull the front standard out of the camera. And there we have a beautiful Speed Graphic ready to go. So the first thing about a Speed Graphic opposed to a crown graphic is that this camera is heavier. It's slightly thicker because it has this, which is the focal plane shutter. The focal plane shutter is what is the game changer for this camera over my crown graphic, because it means I'm no longer reliant on the front lens or the lens at the front with its internal shutter. I can use this one, which has a rear shutter. There's a focal plane, there's a blind that goes across. And as I dial this knob anti-clockwise, that shutter is now moving across the back, allowing me to use other lenses. So I shall demonstrate that to you. This camera, if you look on the back, has got a Graflock back. So a Graflock back means that I can take this spring back off of the camera. My original 1942 version, I cannot do that. It's just a spring. And that will become very apparent why it's very good to have a Graflock back. If I push in this and this lever either on both sides and push up, I can remove that from the camera. That has now come off the camera. That will become apparent why that is a very good thing to have at some point. And there is my shutter on the back. If I turn the little knob anti-clockwise, you will see that that is now opening up. The blind is opening, and each time I rotate it, the slot is getting smaller. And the reason it's getting smaller is because the smaller the slot, the faster the shot. So now when I push the little lever on the front here, if I push it, pull it towards me, that will go across, that will go across, and now we've opened the camera up at the back. So this focal plane shutter, first of all, make sure if you buy one of these that this shutter is in good condition, nice, and it's not sort of like elephant skin, because that'll be full of pinholes and won't work. They're a devil's thing to get replaced. They're very expensive, so make sure you buy a good one if you're buying one. So that's my focal plane shutter, and that's what this camera is all about, having a focal plane shutter. So I'm now going to put back on the focusing screen. Now again, if I just push it into the two little slots, one either side, one there and pull down, it slots into place. That is my focusing screen. You will get probably a rangefinder. I've never used the rangefinder. It's what they would have used if you were doing a photo shoot or trying to capture an image of Marilyn Monroe coming out of a building. Two basically images line up and you take your shot. I've never ever used that. I've only ever used the ground glass. To open, so I can see the ground glass, I push this little lever just here. That opens up and there is my ground glass screen. If I want to, I can remove this hood. There's a little lever just here. I'm going to put the camera down to do it. If I just give that a little squeeze or a little push, whoops, there you go. I can now take that off. Now I've just got the back, the ground glass screen. For instance, you can now buy something like this. You don't need to, but you can. This is a Cambo back. This is what Dave Burnett would have used when he was doing his Olympic Games. Basically that goes onto the back of the camera and enables me just to look through the eyepiece when I'm focusing. These things are a godsend, they're amazing. So the shot I did of Katerina down the lane, that was done with that. It was bright sunlight and I just put my eye to this piece and I can see clearly through the back of the camera. Absolutely godsend. Very hard to find and very expensive these days. So that's the back of the camera, that's the ground glass screen, and that is my focal plane shutter. On the side here, there is a little window. I'm not sure if you can see it. There you go. And it says 0 at the moment. If I turn this knob a couple of times, it now says 50th of a second. Believe me, it does. Trust me, it does. If I push this little lever at the bottom here, forward, that will now change to 30th of a second. So I can change my exposure here as well as by turning that knob. And if I keep turning this knob, I can bring it right round to 500ths of a second. And if I flip that little knob across, I'm now on 1,000th of a second. Something I could never get with my front lens. So I'm going to fire it now by pulling this little lever towards me, and you'll hear the shutter go past. 1, 2, 3, 4. And that little window will always tell you what exposure you've got. And you can't focus on the back until you've basically wound the blind back all the way into the camera or out of the camera, so you end up with a nice big hole. So we've got our Graflex back, we've got our focal plane shutter, we've got our lens at the front, and if we push these two little levers either side, lovely little lens. It goes from 400th of a second and it's 4.7 and it goes up to f32. Beautiful thing, absolutely gorgeous, takes some wonderful images. But we're using a speed graphic, and the reason we're using a speed graphic is because we want to put things like this into it. This is an Aero Ektar. So that's an Aero Ektar lens, World War II reconnaissance lens. Be careful with these because they did have thorium when they were making them. You'll often find they're brown when you get them. Put them in ultraviolet light and it will clear it out. Don't stick it under your pillow. It's not a good idea. What you will find is when you buy one of those lenses, it may not fit through this little gap here. In other words, the lens will be too wide. You'll need either to file out a tiny amount, or I used a bicycle chain remover just to open it up, expand it a tiny amount. At that point, the lens will now fit into the camera, slide it across, and you have got an Aero Ektar ready to go, shooting 5" by 4". If you were to fit on the back of it, this thing here, you now have the Dave Burnett Olympic Games 2012 setup. In other words, I can shoot 5x4 film just by viewing through here without having to put a dark hood over my head or use the rangefinder. Absolutely beautiful combination. As I say, I've used that quite a lot. Beautiful lens, bloody heavy though, very expensive. So here's an alternative. An alternative I've used. So the big one I say has done the Katerina shot down the lane. That was the with the Aero Ektar. This little one here, this is a Ektar projector lens, f2.5, 150mm. You will get drop off around this, around the edges on this one, but it will fit in. It's so much lighter than an Aero Ektar. The results are stunning. I absolutely love this thing. I think that was £60 as opposed to £1,000. I buy the actual lens boards. I think I buy them off Etsy. This one I've actually screwed this one in. It's a bit Heath Robinson, but it stops it dropping off. This lens used to fall out quite a lot. Another option I've got is the Hydros Matte 2.8 150. I shot with this lens at Julia Margaret Cameron's house to do some wet plate collodion. Beautiful images. Again, this one is so light. If I put this in here, I've got this tiny little light, and sadly I can't show you the back because it's just, oh, maybe I could. Not sure if I can show you anything on the back because there's too much light in here. No, there's too much light in here. So light. This combo is so light and just wonderful to work with. Tiny depth of field. So obviously I've got, you know, shooting at 2.5, I've got a 2.8, I've got tiny depth of field. And then at the end of it, I can put things like this in. This is a lovely 19th century 1890 Petval lens. I'll be doing some more tutorials on Petval lenses. And this thing just fits nicely in here, and I can get that lovely Petval bokeh swirl, etc., etc., which is absolutely gorgeous. I love it. So that is your Speed Graphic. Be careful if you buy a Speed Graphic that you buy a 5.4 one and not a smaller one. Easily done. Very, very important bit. A few bits. If you want to shoot landscape, use the tripod mount, which is on the base. If you want to shoot portrait, use the tripod mount, which is hidden under the strap. So that's where the strap goes. There's a tripod mount there. If you use that one, you can shoot portrait and you don't have to swivel the camera around on your tripod. So that's a good one to know. The big one is that when you put the camera away and you slide that little knob out and push it back in all the way, push it across again, make sure that you dial it all the way back in with a knob on the side here. If you don't, what happens is when you close the camera, there's a little guide here and a little guide just here, and you will lift this front up and it will snap them off, and they are a devil's own to get replaced. And to close the camera, I'm going to push in these, having wound it all the way back in, I'm going to push these two arms in, and the back is going to fold up. And that's how I'm going to close the back up. Now, the beauty of having the Graflex back is that I can take this off the camera and put other things on. And I'm going to do a separate video all about that. But what that enables me to do is shoot Instax as well as FP100C. FP100C you can't get anymore, but I'm able to shoot Instax with this thing. And because we're going through these quality lenses, you get these actually really, really nice Instax. And it's lovely when I'm working with a model to be able to give them something in colour. So there's all the options. These are the films I shoot with. I'm either shooting with Fomapan 400 or I'm shooting with Portra 160 or Portra 400. I'll be doing a tutorial on developing in C41. The plate holders, or the film holders, I've got a few here. This is my Fidelity one. Pretty standard. Obviously, you just open it up. Let's turn it around. So that says new. I always write on the front of mine new. And when I turn it over, put the little levers out of the way, and I've done my shot, I put it back in again, and I write exposed on the other side. I know it's got these little black and white at the top, but in the heat of a photo shoot, if you've got 20 of these going, believe me, it saves you a lot of heartache when you're developing up. That's a plastic one. Here's a wooden one. Works just the same, but because I think I prefer the plastic ones because they don't swell and expand. That's the wooden one, works just the same. And here's an old, even older one, and this one's got septums inside it as well. But works just the same, but I think I prefer the Fidelities because they're just plastic and that's the way they work. And that's basically it. That is the Speed Graphic. That is the Speed Graphic. That's what I work with a lot. That's done some of my favourite shots because I can do all the variations of changing all the lenses. So thank you for watching that. Please ask if you have any more questions about it. I'm going to put a little slideshow at the end of some of the images that I've taken with this and the combination. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing to work with. Yeah, enjoy. Make sure you buy a 5x4 and not the smaller version. And it's a joy to work with, and make sure you've got a good focal plane shutter. Anyway, have a great day. Start shooting analog if you're not already doing it, and please leave some comments. Please subscribe wherever that is, down there or down there. I haven't quite worked out how to do that yet, or how to put buttons on. Please do subscribe, and please leave some comments about what you'd like to see next. All right, thanks a lot. Thanks for watching this episode.